Hey, 420 MSP, back with the Professor Paul Seaborn. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Doing great, Harry. How are you?
Good, good. Man, I sure enjoyed tracking the work you do, and you've done it for a number of years. Thank you for keeping that up. This round, I want to talk about two things. One is post-election. So you had some insights on post-election, and then also you had a 6-week return visit to your home country of Canada, and you have a couple of observations as they clearly lead the way in the cannabis segment. So post-election, go, Paul.
Yeah, I think post-election, what you and I talked about in the fall wasn't too far off. Marijuana was pretty decisive victor in most states and most ballot initiatives. And I think there's no indication that's going to change anytime soon, right? It seems like the majority of demographic groups, whether it's by political party, age, rural, urban, more and more the majority is with cannabis. You either have to craft a really restrictive, offensive ballot initiative, or it takes a lot of money and effort on the other side to not have those things succeed. But I think two things that we've seen since the election are worth noting. One is there's still a lot of steps that have to happen, from voters voicing their opinion to an industry popping up with real stores that need IT equipment and security software and everything else. And South Dakota is showing us one of those hurdles is you actually have to get the initiative put into law. And right now you're seeing the court step in and deem something as unconstitutional. That may well be the case. Maybe it was too broad reaching in what they put in the ballot initiative, but it's really hard to pinpoint these timelines because that can go wrong. You set a really relaxed implementation time frame, and what you voted on in 2020 is implemented in 2022. So I think just a sign of the ballot being the first of many steps. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention. The other one, I'm really seeing this firsthand here in Virginia. I don't know how many of your audience are in our area, but we're seeing a different approach here where the legislature itself is moving very quickly towards legalization in Virginia. So they had a report to the legislature in November. In this short session right now, they've already passed through the House and Senate. They just need to reconcile this bill, and they could potentially be in a legal position by July or around that time. So
Yeah.
that's pretty phenomenal. And I think what really struck me is how much more nuanced the debate is here. People are bringing up issues around, is it going to be too consolidated? Not enough players. Social equity is very front center in Virginia, like I've never seen anywhere else. I think that's a really positive thing overall, but it makes for a very complicated debate because people have very high goals for what they want this legislation to accomplish.
Yeah, question for you. So what I'm hearing you say is, I know from the state of Washington and the work I've done over the years that the voters made the decision. What I'm hearing you say is it's shifting over to the legislative body. And again, any final thoughts on that? And then we'll talk Canada or South Dakota and then Canada.
Yeah, well, I probably said enough about South Dakota for one day, but yeah, I think when you have the legislature, right, I think you should expect that to be a venue of compromise. So you have to kind of put something forward, even if you have a majority in that body that admits a smell test for the opposition. That's not going to cause you to have a target on your back. So it lends itself to more of a dialogue and compromise than a ballot initiative does. But it can kind of collapse under its own weight. And I think New Jersey has been the example where so many voices, so many goals, so much to do, and we can't get it done in a session. We delay. So Virginia's looking like they're a little more focused, and they may get to the end sooner. And I would keep an eye on that because it could be a year or two, and there's something actually happening maybe ahead of some of these states that voted last November.
Yeah.
So let me shift gears to Canada for a second. So
Okay.
I was very fortunate for personal reasons to need to and be able to go back. And I was actually spending time in Newfoundland, which is my home province, as far east as you can go, almost
Yeah.
halfway to Europe. And I would just opt for two observations that would be kind of different than what you might see for an audience member who's in the States. One is the real debate over whether this should be legalized or not. It's over. I mean, I talked to all sorts of people, high school classmates, grandparents, everyone in between. It was decided, it was implemented a year and a half ago. We didn't have ballot initiatives and all the controversy. It was national. It's done. People know it's going to be part of their community, and that debate is just not there. The store is there. You drive by it on your way to get groceries or on your way to church. It's just kind of, they're over it. And so that's an interesting thing to see it reach that level of acceptance. and yet at the same time, so little of the population going there, right? There's actually not that high a number of people consuming. It didn't lead to any sort of mass increase. And I think it's going to take time, right? People are happy to accept it in their community, but then, they maybe don't rush out the next week themselves, or they're holding back to see what other people are doing. And so it's actually very unexciting from a growth point of view. People are actually surprised and underwhelming their projections on sales, because it's here. We stopped that debate, but now the next step is, will people substitute a cannabis purchase for what they used to buy at the liquor store? Will they invite friends over for a social event? And because of the long history and it was illegal for so long, it just takes time. So
It does.
but to see that in person and to go back, I hadn't been there for a few years, it kind of really did come to life. And I think that it's pretty representative of what's happening across the country in Canada.
Yeah, I would concur on a couple of fronts. So the attitudinal preferences have shifted to favorable clearly. And, I'm about 4 years in my role in Canatech, and it's clearly shifted in that 4 years. Even with our messaging, we were a little bit, like this a couple years ago with some of the work I was doing, and now we're like this. And then on the substitution thing, it's interesting you bring that up. Doggone it, I can't find the link. I've been meaning to send it to 2 or 3 people, but there was a really good article recently, I think it's MJ Biz, that talked about people are substituting cannabis for alcohol. And it wasn't so much a shopping basket. They take one thing out, put one thing in. It had to do more with health. It had to do with alcohol consumption. And the article spoke up to that, people maybe who want to cut back on drinking or stop drinking can substitute cannabis. They laid out the reasoning for it. I don't know how many people are really doing that, but I suspect it's fairly high. And then the other thing was the health effect. In fact, I just had my annual checkup yesterday with the doc, and went better than I thought, to be honest, the way I live. But we talked about alcohol, of course, is not good for your body at some level, right? I mean, it's a toxin in your liver when it's processed. And cannabis doesn't seem to have the same markers. You know what I mean? I think of cannabis more like the green grass in my yard. It's grass. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually did a better job than me of pointing out the nuance, right? So yeah, it's not just a question of, do I pick alcohol or cannabis in a particular situation? Because there are situations where I would never choose alcohol because I'm having a health issue, but I might choose cannabis, and vice versa. But yeah, I think cannabis overlaps with alcohol use. It overlaps with prescription drugs. It overlaps with over-the-counter drugs. It overlaps with other foods that I consume just for various reasons. Even overlaps with other things I could do, like getting a massage or going to a yoga class. And so that's one of the things that makes this industry really interesting, is it does have multiple use cases that may or may not overlap. I guess the last thought I had, I think about this industry all the time, like you do, and I watched the Super Bowl on Sunday, and we had our probably a little less alcohol advertising than some years. I think they pull back, but you still had kind of the glorification of having a little get together over a drink, and kind of the alcohol being central to community, and kind of like when we have a good time. And I think you need to play the futuristic game of thinking, like, at what point will we have that commercial on the Super Bowl where people are getting together and sharing edibles or smoking flower?
Yeah.
And, it might be a decade away with the way that things change, but I think someday, and maybe we'll look back and say, like, what were we doing with our attitudes towards these substances in the past? At least that's my thoughts. So.
Yeah, no, I like it. And I'll tell you, and we'll end it here, is that when that commercial runs, I can assure you it's going to be like as memorable as the Macintosh commercial in 1984, where they had the Big Brother scene and the lady throws the thing and breaks the glass, right? It could very well be the one, right? You and I might be saying, remember that commercial?
Yeah, so someday, Harry, someday.
All right. Hey, we'll talk to you next quarter. Thanks, Paul. Keep it safe.
Bye-bye.
All right.